and welcome to the last mixtape. My name is Stephen White, and on this week's show, we delve into Bob Vylan and the important politics of Glastonbury 2025. But first,
an artist's duty, as far as I'm concerned, is to reflect the times. I think that is true of painters, sculptors, poets, musicians. As far as I'm concerned, it's their choice. But I choose to reflect the times and the situations in which I find myself. That, to me, is my duty. And at this crucial time in our lives, when everything is so desperate, when every day is a matter of survival, I don't think you can help but be involved. Young people, black and white, know this. That's why they're so involved in politics. We will shape and mold this country, or it will not be molded and shaped at all anymore. So I don't think you have a choice. How can you be an artist and not reflect the times?
not my words, but the words of the legendary Nina Simone. Why, dear listener, and indeed, dear viewer, were we just listening to Nina Simone talk about the role of the artist in troubling times? Well, this week, I thought we'd talk about Bob Vylan and Glastonbury 2025 and the important politics that were shown on stage. Indeed, in this week's episode, we'll be delving into dangerous art and those that try to oppress it. Let us begin with the moment itself and the words of Bob Vylan at Glastonbury 2025.
Free. Alright, but have you heard this one though? Death to the IDF. 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 Hell yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be, will be, inshallah, will be free.
Last weekend at Glastonbury 2025, Bob Vylan walked on stage like they were kicking down the door of a house that they owned. No metaphors, no PR gloss. In a world in which the BBC tried to censor Kneecap by not airing them live, Bob Vylan walked into that void and lit it up. This was rage aimed at institutions, at the system, at government policies, and the reaction to calls for freedom and calls against genocide. And the crowd, they were with him. This wasn't politics with a polite face. This was punk in its rawest, most undigestible form. Ugly and honest. A wake-up call to all those who tried to censor art and artists. And almost immediately, Glastonbury, the so-called home of counterculture, flinched. The media reframed it as a threat. The police launched an investigation into what was essentially free speech. We love protest when it's marketable, when it's part of the programming. But the second someone steps out of line, not with violence, but with volume, suddenly the stage is too political. What did they expect? A band named Bob Vylan didn't come to play the game. It was a warning that even at festivals built on rebellion, there's a line you're not supposed to cross. And just a few stages away, someone else was drawing that line in a very different way.
And people who are watching this may, they might be disappointed at the lack of politics in this show and our forthcoming shows and probably our future shows, because it's, I want you to know it's a conscious decision, and we honestly don't want our legacy to be one of politics. We want it to be that of love and friendship, because we, and I'm not trying to be too earnest, but you can go out into the world and there's loads of politics everywhere, and I think we don't need more politics, we need more love and friendship. And I know that's really basic, but if you are a young kid and you are inspired by like this band or something like that, Don't aspire to like play a stage or be a certain size. Aspire for like this level of friendship and love in what you do, and you'll never fail. And I love you. Thank you so much for coming.
Indeed, not my words, but the mild words of Matty Healy. Now, to begin with, I should say that Matty Healy has every right to say this and every right to say this about his art. Art can be about enjoyment, it can be about entertainment, it can be about being in the moment and spreading positivity. However, where I take issue with what Matty Healy says, especially on the weekend of Glastonbury 2025, that was so politically charged going into it, and the times around us, and to call back to Nina Simone's quote at the top of the show, reflecting the times you're in, I feel that that is a cop-out. The very idea that their show, the 1975s, and by extension Matty Healy's, was about love, about spreading positivity, about feeling love and giving love out, and that by extension the Kneecap, Bob Vylan and other performers who are calling out Palestine, such as CMAT, I believe Inhaler did it as well, were not about that tentatively, in contrast to what they were doing, because they weren't being political. That theirs was about love and maybe theirs wasn't, it was about politics. I can't think of anything more about love than showing empathy. Than showing empathy for a group of people who are being persecuted, who are being killed. There's innocent children that are being shot. This has all been, of course, admitted to by the IDF. The very people who are admitting to shooting people, hungry, starving civilians, unarmed, and being able to empathise with those people who are going through a genocide and saying, no, this needs to stop. These people have every single right. And I, as an artist, am going to use this massive stage on BBC with people there to call attention to this, to say, stop what you're doing. The very idea that isn't about love, that empathy, that understanding of other people and other people's plight and being able to see it in yourself, in themselves and yourself, is not about love, but him on stage singing about pop songs to a pentatonic scale is. I think that's the most ego-driven and just bullshit approach to it in its entirety. There are plenty of artists who over the weekend just perform their songs, and that's totally cool too. You can do that. But the tacit way in which it's kind of implied, well, we don't want to be known as a political band forever because that's a bad thing to begin with. And believe you me, I don't think anyone was ever going to look back on the 1975 and call them overtly political, although they have had political instances in their career. So I think that's kind of as a cowardly way. The cowardice of it is what really gets me. Kind of standing up on stage and even the way he stumbles through it. And I don't want to, I actually like a lot of the 1975's tracks, actually, to be perfectly honest with you. I think they have some really cool tunes. But I just thought that was such a tone-deaf moment. So you could perform and do whatever you want to do. But Bob Vylan and Kneecap and them can do what they want to do. All these things can exist. And I think for me, that was one of the things that struck me about Glastonbury, is that all these things can exist, regardless of what people were saying, that this doesn't, Bob Vylan doesn't have a place on stage and this shouldn't be allowed and it shouldn't be aired. And we really need to have a talk with the BBC about what they air on television. Fucking do you? Why? What's the idea that everyone in that crowd, that me, that you, that anyone in this crowd needs to be babied and needs to you can't hear about this, but on the news you can see all this stuff about the death of civilians in Gaza, and that your government is funding it, and that your government is abating it and letting it happen, and that we're all standing here as an international community watching it happen, and governments are either helping it happen or doing nothing at all. And I think it's very interesting to watch the reaction when people are disseminating this online. And I've spoken about it before, and I know it's an old chestnut, but it's interesting to see subtext and how performance is stripped away when people who don't understand it talk about it. And I've seen enough interviews on radio and stuff like that where hard-hitting men sit there and ask the hard-hitting questions while they hard-hittingly tell their guests that they can only answer in yes and no, especially about a situation with as broad and as deep and as long stretching a history as the conflict in Gaza, and that you can only say yes or no and condemn this, and you have to say yes or no because I ask hard-hitting questions. Those type of people do not understand art. Those type of people do not understand subtext. Those type of people go, well, we found another recording of him saying this and we found another recording of him saying this. Dangerous art, provocative art, which is what this is, because it has provoked a conversation. And this is, to me, why one of the many reasons why they and the government and people like that want to control it, because they don't want people having conversations, people talking about this. They don't want, especially young people, gathering together on this because they can see the danger. Apathy is far, far better. And the idea that, if you're going to protest about Gaza, you can't say inflammatory things, and you can't. It would be much better if you just stood in the corner about it. That's the troubling thing to me, and I think that's why it's so brave of Bob Vylan to do that, and the other performers who did to come up and say that. I think, to me, it's provocative art. To me, it's provocative performance art. It is speaking to a military organisation that have admitted to shooting civilians who are trying to get aid. Palestinian flags waved in the flare-smoked air, cutting through the heat like messages smuggled by the wind. Not part of the show, but part of the atmosphere. This wasn't politics as branding, it was something messier, more alive, more uncontrollable. You could feel it rumbling under the surface, bubbling up from the ground itself. In chants, in silence, in symbols passed from hand to hand. CMAT delivered it with humour and heartbreak, calling out cruelty while giving the crowd something to dance to. Inhaler brought it through the cracks, less direct maybe, but still you could feel it in the edges of the setlist. But some artists didn't just hint, they hit. Kneecap stormed the stage like they were reclaiming stolen ground, sunglasses on, tricolours flying, laughing one minute, raging the next. Irish Republican references made them police targets by the end of the weekend. Bob Vylan already under investigation for a chant. This is how protest looks now, uninvited but undeniable. Earlier, Matty Healy told the crowd that the 1975 didn't want to be known for their politics, and so it is. But Glastonbury 2025 felt different. It didn't feel scripted, it felt like something cracking open and leaving them behind. And the artists who choose to speak, in whatever way they could, weren't performing a part, they were risking something. And that, to me, all of that, the impact that it has had, the impact it has had Bob Vylan, and the bravery to stand up and say that this doesn't matter, there are bigger things than Bob Vylan, there are bigger things than Kneecap, there are bigger things than all of this. And why this is being investigated, and why the police have to look into it, and all of these things, whilst far greater crimes are being committed. The double standard that international war crimes are not worth looking into, but people on stage expressing through art are. And it's nuanced when civilians are shot and killed and are starved to death. That's a more nuanced thing. But this man, Bobby Vylan and Bob Vylan as a band as well, standing up to it, Kneecap, CMAT, Inhaler, all of these acts. Bob Vylan is the one that is the lightning rod at Glastonbury for this. There's something about, to me, the idea, as I say, the Julius Caesar of it. I believe I spoke about that before, that I will relinquish power once Rome is free of all its enemies. Once the barbarians are at the door, I will stop. And this idea that the government and the BBC and all of these people have just like, well, we only want to ban this one person. We only want to censor this one show. Or we're just going to take Kneecap off just in case they do anything. But don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. In 20 or 30 years' time, we'll make a documentary about how important this moment was and how we televised it. But this idea, this mission creep of, it'll just be this one performance. It'll just be this one piece of art. Don't worry. It was just this one thing they said about this very particular thing. Don't worry about it. But it isn't, is it? They're beginning also to ban protesting groups as well, again, who are protesting for Palestine. It's this kind of slowly but surely, how can they make people agree? And that's where, as I say, on a lot of these shows, that's where art comes in. It is an outward expression of the unexpressed at times, and it is the outward expression of the oppressed at times, knowing that coming from Ireland. And that can take many shapes and forms. That can take anger, that can take fury, that can take aggression. We've seen all sorts of these things expressed through art. I know it's an old chestnut, and I know I always talk about it, but Johnny Cash never shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. He sang about it a hell of a lot on stage. He even sang about it to a bunch of prisoners in prison as it was, broadcast or it was recorded. But he didn't do it. It's a song. It's a song about something else. It's a song about society. It's a song about what makes people get to these places. He didn't actually do it. And we as people can understand and disseminate art a lot better than a politician or some knobhead on the radio or on television asking people to answer things in binary because it only can be answered that way. Those people are not interested in subtext, and to be perfectly honest, they know it exists, they don't care it exists. What they want is, I saw a person say X on stage, therefore they are Y. And that helps, because that helps with everything, and that helps muddy the water, and that helps with the big distraction, isn't it? Whilst artists like Kneecap and all of these and Bob Vylan and all that are calling attention to it, it is a kind of a magic trick of kind of making the story about Bob Vylan and what is to be done. And we idea that going forward for Glastonbury, again, which is this rebellious show, or at least it was once, and they did put on Kneecap and they did put on Bob Vylan, they would have known who these people are. And at no point, I should say, because, you know, Free Palestine was up on the screens and anything, they didn't even pull the plug or anything like that. But after the fact, once the hammer looked like it was about to fall, they did. This is really, to me, that kind of idea, like that Glastonbury, we're looking at, you know, Matty Healy in the 1975 and what they say. They have every right to say that. He's every right. Rod Stewart, who performed that weekend as a legend, said a bunch of stuff about Nigel Farage. I'm Irish. Guess how I feel about Nigel Farage? Not good. And like, he also said, he has a right to go on stage. And if he wanted to say stuff about that, he could. He's every right. We as people have the right to disseminate what art we consume, how we consume it, and what we take away from it. Nobody gets to decide what gets past the line, what we get to see. This is one of those moments where, and there's a Bob Dylan lyric about it, and I think it's in Blowing in the Wind, and it's about not being able to control the youth. That, you know, the youth will outgrow you and you won't be able to control them. And that the government has to accept that. And you see that in this kind of instance that there isn't that. There's this kind of, you know, wanting to control the narrative, wanting to control people. And if they get into art spaces, and it's, you know, as I say, you know, Bob Vylan, and fair play, they have come out and said, you know, we don't care, there's much bigger things, and Kneecap have said the same, but there are festivals that have banned or that have cancelled both bookings for both artists, and that'll only continue. That's the beginning, that's the root and the ground. And if you allow it to take purchase, if it continues, that won't stop at music, it'll continue with film, it will continue with documentary, photography. It'll infiltrate everything that there is, and the excuses will be made. So, well, during the Bob Vylan thing, we did this, so there's a precedent for it, so don't worry about it. And for, you know, Kneecap, we did this. That idea of dangerous art not being comfortable, not needing to be comfortable. There are a lot of people saying, and I saw this kind of, you know, and it mirrors what Matty Healy says in 1975, this idea, well, art needs to bring people together, and Glastonbury was about bringing people together. No, it fucking wasn't. There's lots of instances in Glastonbury where people were protesting, where I believe about apartheid and all these types of things, that music and art can be all things. It can be beautiful art. There can be beautiful art about bringing people together. There can be beautiful art about everyone coming together and happy clappy and all of that stuff, kumbaya. Absolutely. Art can be a multitude of things. I've saw a couple of comments as well, people saying, well, Kneecap shouldn't be allowed. Well, shouldn't be allowed fucking what? Shouldn't be allowed what? What do you mean by shouldn't be allowed? I think we all know what you mean by shouldn't be allowed. And if we allow, and I keep harping on about this, I know, but if we allow governments and media, and I include myself in this, decide what you want to listen to, what Bob Vylan did on stage is so, so important. To me, it's a provocation of art. It is using words as a weapon. It is using words to strike at the heart of something, to call attention to something. I don't know Bob Vylan as people. I don't know them at all, but I would expect that in some way this may be the intention of the art, is to begin this conversation, is to probably expose this conversation out into the light. And I think when you watch people disseminate and watch people talk about it, their shock and their awe about what he said in comparison to when faced with the numbers of civilians killed in Gaza in this instance, and the amount of people being killed on a daily basis, and the famine that will befall these people. Well, that's a bit more nuanced, and those aren't yes and no answers, and actually I need bullshit. I don't mind people discussing art. They have the right to discuss that as well. Absolutely. But you do not get to say what art gets through the door and what art doesn't. Glastonbury 2025 felt less like a neatly programmed festival and more like a living collage, a tangle of voices, clashes, ideals and contradictions. But only one is being investigated, because that's the truth of this year's Glastonbury. Everyone was speaking, but not everyone was free. When Kneecap took to the stage, BBC cameras looked away, but fans didn't. A woman in the crowd held her phone high, live streaming the entire set in real time, cutting through the censorship with shaky Wi-Fi connection and sheer defiance. Because when institutions pull the plug, people become the signal. This is the tension now. Governments talk about banning artists. Police investigate symbolism. Outrage is algorithmic, but enforcement is very real. And yet, thousands stood in the mud, chanting back every lyric. Not because they agreed with everything, but because the art hit a nerve. Because it felt urgent and it felt alive. Art, especially dangerous art, should not be judged by press releases, governments, or investigated like contraband. It should be judged by the people, because if we let platforms, police and politicians decide what's too loud, we're not curating the culture anymore. They are, and they're fencing us in. These are dangerous days indeed. Bob Vylan, Kneecap, and the other artists that stood for Palestine and the other artists that expressed themselves politically at Glastonbury 2025 have every right to do so. We as people have the right to consume art and disseminate art however we want, and we have the right to be exposed to art and make the decision for ourselves. Art is nuanced, it's subtextual, it's metaphor, it's meaning, it's symbolism. These are all the things that governments, politicians, judges, lawyers, solicitors, annoying people on the radio, and in some cases podcasters, don't understand and don't get, because they don't want to. And we can't live in a world where artistic expression is defined and oppressed by people that do not understand it. This is a moment, just like Nina Simone was saying at the beginning of this week's show, it's about reflecting the times, and it's an artist's duty to do so, however that comes about and whatever shape that takes. She knew it all the way back then. Bob Vylan knows it right now, as does Kneecap, CMAT, Inhaler and all these acts, Fontaines too, and all the acts as well that have pulled out of the festivals that Bob Vylan has been cancelled from. Do not let anybody, regardless of your viewpoint, remove your ability to express how you feel and what you think artistically. That will be a crossing of a Rubicon we cannot go back from.
Now understand this. Images control perception. Young people, perception is everything. You have to study Nazi propaganda to understand what's going on with the transmission of media images. You have to know the fact of advertising is subliminal seduction. It ain't nothing new. You have to understand there's a guy called Noam Chomsky that influenced me to make Don't Believe the Hype. You gotta understand, when they have a revolution in the country everywhere around the world, what's the